extension distance to pitch release, which is really what the focus of that video. So I thought we could kind of have some fun talking technology. And any other questions you guys have? And I just had this on Facebook Live and it didn't pop up. So let me throw this up on Facebook Live. Let's see. Let me get there 1 second. All right, so we already got a question. Let me jump right in here. Isn't baseball based on the sagittal plane instead of the vertical? What do you mean by vertical plane? Sagittal plane would be forward and back. The frontal plane is more lateral, left to right, or they'll call it the lateral plane. And then the transverse plane is rotation. So baseball, it's gonna, like pitching, will use all that. It'll be multiplanar. So, a lot of coaches will say that pitching is a rotational movement. It's part of it, but it's not just a rotational movement. It's like I said, it's multiplanar. When you start down your stride, you're in the frontal plane. Then when you hit front foot strike, what we call trying to get hip to shoulder separation, you're in the transverse plane. And then when you move into your forward trunk tilts, as your front leg extends and your trunk moves forward, that's the sagittal plane. And if you look at the force plate measurements there, you'll see there's vertical force, there's parallel force, or basically shear force pushing against the ground. And so you can see force almost going off in all those directions. Sorry, I'm getting the live stream up on Facebook as well. So there we go. And then, so why do power cleans then? So you do power cleans because they're in the sagittal plane and they're ground force movements. So like I said, if you look at the ground force profiles of pitchers, you see vertical force. Like vertical force has a high correlation to pitching velocity. If you look at TopVelocity.net, we have those force measurements and with a bunch of our pitchers, and then we correlate it to spin rates and ball velocity. And you can see vertical force actually had a pretty strong, moderate to strong correlation to pitching velocity. You see parallel. I didn't run it personally on parallel, but parallel force, shear force has a strong correlation. So the force profiles are moving vertically and horizontally against the ground, both having strong correlations or moderate correlations to ball velocity. So that's why with cleans, you're generating a lot of ground force. Yeah, you want to step in? You're generating that vertical ground force, which is really important. And it's using the kinetic chain. So as Thomas here came down for a camp this weekend, and he has his facility up in Tampa or over in Tampa. And tell them about your facility.
Yeah, I run a nonprofit sports complex out in Tampa through the Underground Network called Unearthed. We're just trying to reach the inner city kids out there to bring baseball, soccer, and fitness. Sometimes we do football too, but my wife and I who run it, she played soccer, I played baseball, so we don't have a lot of football expertise, but we've got a turf field. It's up in University Mall if anyone's in Tampa. But yeah, it's
cool. Tell them really the mission behind it. Can you tell them about that? What you're doing with the academy, what's your purpose, who you're helping, stuff like that?
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're using sports and athletics and fitness to try and bring people together and break down just universally break down barriers and just bring people together and to reach the fatherless areas of our city and to provide just elite fitness and just to provide that elite training to kids who wouldn't have it either because they don't have the finances for it or they just have never been provided
yeah, that's cool.
Space for it.
It's faith-based, which is really helps with the outreach. So if anyone is in the area, that it's nonprofit, if anyone would want to donate and support, you can find them online. What was the domain?
Our website is tampaunderground.com/unearthed. Our Instagram's at unearthedsports.
And if you want donate your services and you want to help, they're always looking for help. And if you're in the area and want a good facility, they're in the process of moving, but
Yep.
you've got a good setup for them. So highly recommended, guys. We're going to try to go out there and do a camp, so we're pretty excited. So Tom's going to hang out and maybe answer some questions with us. So
Yeah.
M. Wills says MLB needs a combine. Heck yeah. MLB Nikki, is it true that it takes over 3 weeks to power clean efficiently? Yeah, it could take 3 to 4 weeks, but there's a study that actually showed that the benefits, the actual improvements made in those 3 to 4 weeks, are supportive of, or will bring you gains. So you're actually making gains in the 3 to 4 weeks of learning the training, because things are improving to get to a proficiency. Like your kinetic chain is getting more fluid and syncing up better and more dynamic. So you start benefiting from that on the field. You start building better strength. You start building better proprioception, right? Because that's what builds a better kinetic chain. All that is going to benefit you on the field. So even in the learning process, studies show that you're benefiting on the field. You're already making gains even while you're still trying to learn and become proficient at the lifts. That's a good question, though. Thanks.
Yeah. And the benefits long term for doing any sort of Olympic lifting is whether it takes 3 weeks or 3 months, like it's worth it, because you're gonna be able to just be so much more explosive if you're able to incorporate those Olympic lifts into your training regimen, and that's going to translate to higher pitching velocity, higher bat speed.
Yeah, it doesn't just stop at pitching velocity. So,
Yeah.
look, you're doing a camp in Tampa. It
Yeah.
says that you're doing a camp in Tampa.
Am I doing a camp in Tampa?
We're gonna have to. He's
We're-
suggesting we do it.
We're absolutely gonna. I'm looking to figure something out. Maybe in a year or so to do. Brent might come out to Tampa to do a camp, and
I'm hoping it's maybe even spring training, maybe before that. But is this not a good time?
no, we
It's a good time.
once we move into that new series, like
Perfect.
we're ready.
All right, maybe we're breaking in. We're trying to do one this year, 2 spring training in Arizona at Zinger's place, Fuel Factory Baseball. I don't know if you guys watched the last podcast I did, or actually I did it with you. Podcast before that, on the Baseball Ops podcast, we did with Zinger, and we kind of did the State of the Union, and we talked about his new facility, Fuel Factory Baseball, fuelfactorysports.com. I'd go check it out. What's up, Alex? Alex is coming down. He's from the Dominican. Pretty excited to have him. He says, I'm coming over. That's great, man. Hey, I'm going to have that computer for you. I know your requirements on it, but I got to get him a computer because he's going to help me do some online stuff to show some of our new products and stuff. Excited to have you down. We got a question over here. Harrison, what's up, man? I know this is not about technology, but my question is, what is the effects of aerobic training on explosiveness? Meaning, when you train your type 1 muscle fibers, does it weaken your type 2 muscle fibers? That's a good question. You know, the body is pretty amazing. So it's hard to say, like, it's on and off switches with the body. Things are pretty organic, but you know, if you are demanding your body to be more explosive, or let's go to anaerobic, if you're demanding your body to run longer distances or produce small amount bursts of energy over longer periods of time, what happens is the body finds little need for, the fast switch fibers. So it doesn't like discard them. You know, what typically happens is they atrophy. So your body doesn't use them as much. It more uses where what serves the purpose. So those type 1s typically are used more, and then they will hypertrophy more. But it's still using the type 2s. Like I said, it's not a binary system. It's more of an analog system. You know, it's a little bit here, a little bit more there. So the thing is, like, you say you go out and you do a lot of anaerobic stuff. It's not like it shuts everything off immediately. It just, things start to change. Your body starts to adapt to it and goes, hey, I don't need this volume of fast twitch muscle fiber. Like, I can start pulling the proteins from that and break it down and build up build a bigger volume of type 1 slow twitch fibers, because that's what I need right now. So, and that takes time. That doesn't happen really fast. So it's called remodeling. You just start remodeling the body. So it's like you're a sculptor and you've been sculpting this sculptor here, and then all of a sudden, I don't like this anymore. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to work on this one. Well, sometimes every now and then you turn around and you take pieces of it to build this one. You turn around and take pieces of it. It's just kind of like that process. It's going to take time. It's not like it's completely shuts it off and then builds the other one. It's more organic. So, but that's a good question. So you have to be careful being too aerobic when you're trying to be an explosive athlete. But just because you went out and ran 5 miles for the day doesn't mean you've ruined your season, but you might experience the ill effects of it over the next week. And if you prolong that for, say, months and months and months, you might really find yourself not in a good place. So that's what you have to be careful of. If one pitcher benches 135 and another benches 225, which one will throw harder? It's hard to tell because that doesn't really tell us the mobility, doesn't really tell us his kinetic chain, doesn't tell us his size. So once again, you got to be careful in this game looking for the correlation coefficient that equals 1, right? There's no like R equals 1, meaning like R equals running throws, 1 for running throws. So like every time we study running throws, it is the 100%, all the effects of velocity is from running throws. Like that's what everybody's looking for, and that never will happen. Like when we do a lot of our correlations, we see like back leg drive is 0.5% of correlation of ball velocity. Well, where's the other, 4 or 6, 5? Where's the other 5 to equal the 1? So that's going to be in other aspects of velocity, and also too, say ground force is that one that had that moderate correlation. Well, there's other things that are affecting like that, like force vector angles. So so it's like, that's the thing, is like it's never gonna be one thing. It's gonna be a collection of many different things, and a lot of things are influencing other things that are influencing the main result. So that's why you really got to understand the big picture. If you get stuck and just looking at one thing, you're gonna get really frustrated. Do you find that?
Yeah.
True?
Pitching is a very complex movement. It's using a lot of different like joints and things, so you can't really analyze someone's like pitching ability based on a 2-joint movement of like your elbow and shoulder. Just because someone can bench a lot of weight doesn't mean that their legs are mobile or their legs are even strong. You have to. It's much more complicated than that. You can't simplify it down to just like how much can you bench.
It'd be like going to a car mechanic who's building race cars for the Daytona 500 and be like, hey, if I just take like this frame of a car and put a really good fuel injection on it, am I gonna win?
Yeah.
Like, no, there's a little more to it than that, right? So you got to be careful of that approach, and I understand that when you don't really know how this works, it's easy to fall into those places. So you really have to study and learn. Yeah. Just had TJ a couple months ago. What should I be doing to stay strong and maintain quick twitch muscles? So, yeah, sorry to hear that, man. It'd be interesting to know why you think TJ occurred. To be honest, that should be a big question, because we want to come back stronger, right? We want to come back and not fall into it again. The chances of recovery, the more you gets less and less and less considerably. So yes, what should you be doing is doing all the things that really will prevent you from having it again. So, how well were you using your legs? And here's the thing about TJ, a lot of times the legs get so much worse because you can't do anything for a long period of time, so your legs really atrophy. When you come back, you're almost even worse. Your biomechanics are almost even worse. So, how strong were your legs? You got to get your legs back. You got to get your total body back. How well were you using your kinetic chain? How well were you using mechanics with your kinetic chain? So you really need to understand. You need to start writing down, what do you think went wrong? Or tell us, what do you think led to it? And let's figure out how to avoid that, if anything, ultimately prevent that, and then let's build on top of that.
Yeah. And any sort of like hip mobility issue, because I partially tore my UCL. I didn't get the surgery, but a lot of that was because I had such tight hips and I was so locked up in my hips. So like, people think it's weird that like my athletic trainer started working on my hips when I had like elbow issues, but it's because a lot of those issues stemmed from like my kinetic chain was just like blocked up. So like I started overexerting with my arm, overthrowing with my arm, and what ended up blowing was like the weakest link. So just because you have like a shoulder problem or like elbow problems, a lot of that comes from either core issues or like hip issues.
Right. I mean, rotator cuff surgery. I'll show my scars. You don't have a scar yet.
I don't have a scar.
I only have 3 little ones. See if you can still see them. I'm getting older now. Can you see them at all? They're like hidden right here.
Yeah, I see that one right there.
And then there's one back there. There's not many left anymore, but I mean they're fading away. So yeah, same thing with me. Really tight hips. Like have had a hard time getting in strides. I mean, I have an episode on the show where we looked at my mechanics and what I had, what video I had of them, and it was atrocious. I actually said the worst mechanics I've ever seen. My mechanics are actually, I'm serious, I had the worst mechanics I've ever seen in any pitcher. And it was because my hips were so tight, what I had to do to my arm was just brutal.
Yeah.
So Right. You gotta.
Get your hips loose.
Well, would you
And strengthen them.
Right. Would you say lower arm slots have better external rotation? Example: Pedro Martinez, Billy Wagner. Yeah, you do see that. So lower arm slots. I wouldn't say it's better external rotation. I'd say you probably have more external rotation up here. But what you're seeing is, I don't know. That's a good question. I wouldn't say it's better external rotation. It just what it is it looks more dislocating. But if, for example, if my slot's here, like start to pull my arm back. Tell me where it more easily goes back. Right there. And let's go up to about here. Now go there.
But definitely. Right
Okay,
here.
let's go up to here.
It's a lot easier.
Ooh, another pop.
A little pop.
But the point is, see how it gets easier the higher you go up?
Yep.
So technically, higher arm slots have more external rotation.
Yeah.
But for some reason, when you get massive amounts of down here, it just looks grotesque. Mainly because probably it's such a harder place to get external rotation. So if Wagner and who else, Martinez were up here, the arms would probably be like down, like way down, right? What mobility drills do you use for improving hip abduction? So, I always go through it through stretching, strengthening, or mashing. Where they say 3 S's: smashing, stretching, strengthening. So you can mash the area. You could strengthen. I think with hip abduction, you'd probably want to strengthen. It's always good in the hip to strengthen the glute because it gives it stability. It also helps it get in a good place in the ball and socket and move more freely. It also, too, helps you get a better posture. Getting a better posture gives you more hip mobility. So when I'm in the hips, I like to go into posture, glute strength. I like to go into, and then you can start stretching. So you could get in like the super frogs positions where you're on your knees squatting. You could try to do a split just standing there. You could do that, we call the X-wing fighters. You lay on your back and you use a band around your feet and you let your feet your feet lay open backwards.
There's not stripper stretch. The stripper stretch where the one where you're basically getting your feet out and then you're bringing your hips back and forth. Like I could probably, I don't know how far back I could go, but like you're basically here and then you're working your hips forward and backward and you'll feel that like impingement in your hips.
Well, if you and the thing with the impingement is you don't want to be hitting bone on bone. So if you're slamming your femur into your hip pelvis, then you could be at end of range. So sometimes those pinches is that starting to happen. Now, you still could have a lot of tissue there, and you probably just maybe there's tissue that could still be maybe broken up. But the point is that if you're starting to feel pinches, you're probably in end of range. And sometimes what at that point is see if getting your hips in a different part of the socket gives you more range. So sometimes if your hip is more in the front of the socket, it doesn't want to abduct as much than if it's in the back of the socket. It might abduct more. So you might want to try playing around with, at that point, if you're feeling impingements, where it is in the socket.
Yeah, and that's essentially yoga. Is you're just going through flows and trying to find different ways to like just loosen up those areas. So like get into stretches, but feel free to move around in those stretches.
But here's the thing, like stretching, and you got to be careful how you stretch because the central nervous system is causing a lot of the tightness. And the central nervous system will tighten a muscle if the muscle's too weak or if, it's usually going to be linked to weakness. So if it's weak, but it's a stabilizer and it's going to over tighten because the body's going, you're weak, and if you get too weak, the joint's going to rip apart. So I'm going to knot you up because what's the main priority? The joint doesn't rip apart. Okay, yeah, maybe it tears the muscle, but still the joint is still holding together. So that's what so the problem is if you're sitting there and say your psoas is freaking just like a piano chord, you could stretch it and it'll temporarily give you some relief, but it's just going to go right back to tension because that's that central nervous system going, hey, this joint is vulnerable. So
you're not actually addressing the problem.
Right. So the problem is more, hey, get my glute stronger. My glute gives stability to the joint. Now the central nervous system goes, hey, now the joint's protected. Now I can relax the psoas. So be careful. You might be in a position where you're stretching something every day and it's not getting better because that's the central nervous system trying to still protect itself.
Yeah.
Is there any independent research on the bad effects of weighted balls? Yes. Mike Reynolds' study is the only one that looked at it over time. Or actually, Mike Reynolds' study, someone else did a study, Driveline did a study, but the only thing is it's they looked at it differently. They looked at it was weighted implements. It really wasn't weighted. If you're saying weighted baseballs, so they used, I think their PlyoCare balls. The Mike Reynolds study used baseballs and used them at high intense, and it looked like what I read was the driveline study didn't use at high intent. There didn't look like there was a significant increase in velocity because of that. There was an increase in velocity with the Reynolds study. The Reynolds study showed a lot of injury. The driveline study didn't show any injury. But like you said, you're looking at weighted implements and you're looking at weighted baseballs. You're looking at high intent weighted baseballs. Weren't looking at high intent. So those are the studies I've seen when you're trying to look at injury. Now, ASMI did one looking at torques in a single session, and there was a lot of differences there. The torques seemed to go up highest off the mound in the moving throws. I wouldn't say they were running throws. They were more like crow hop throws. The 5 ounces actually didn't go up in those throws, but the weighted balls they only went up to like 9 ounces. The torques went up there excessively. So that's why I caution, just if I look at the Reynolds study that threw weighted baseballs and the ASM study that threw weighted baseballs, the only ones that throw weighted baseballs that looked at torques or injury over time, it looked very dangerous. So be careful, specifically at high intense. Specifically at high intense, it looked dangerous. That's why I'm a big advocate against it.
And you got to be aware of the time frame of these studies too, because obviously like weighted baseballs are going to help someone in like a short time frame, but what's the long-term health of that guy? Like,
and that was the thing with the ASMI or the Mike Reynolds, which was also ASMI. They were affiliated to the study. Mm-hmm. They followed them for 2 seasons, and first season they saw there was 30%, almost 30% injury, and they were broken ribs, Tommy Johns, torn labrums. It was crazy. So, and where did they come from? I think there was only one Tommy John. A guy had to have Tommy John in the study out of 15 guys, and then 3 others came after into the season. So you're right. They were saying a lot of the injuries actually happening after the training because of the condition it puts the shoulder and elbow in.
Yeah.
How do you do cleans if you're not allowed to drop weights at your gym? I went through that. I train at 24 Hour Fitness.
True.
So basically you gotta so that's a good point. So if I clean, I drop to my thigh and then I squat back down. I don't like seeing guys roll their backs and putting the bars down.
Yeah.
Not a good thing to do. Anything you'd recommend on that?
Just trying to go through the same progression down as you do up. Like if you get into that front rack, you're letting that weight drop, but you're like decelerating with your hips. You're not like letting that, like you don't let your back roll or your thoracic spine like curve when you drop that. You want to keep everything locked in, decelerate with your hips, and then you can slowly lower the weight like you're doing like a deadlift or like an RDL or something.
Perfect. You get to pick some YouTube questions. I did the first one, so just go down the row.
Okay.
Okay, Ben Rothier says, do you think working from different positions in the clean, below the knee, cleans from the blocks, are better at enhancing power than hang cleans? To me, they are hang cleans. Hang cleans is hanging the bar. So if you're blocked there, or you're hanging there, or you're below the knee, they're really all hang clean versions. So they're variations. I would support them all. I don't think one is better than the other. I would support them all. So
Baseball Man 99 says sumo versus regular deadlift. What's the preference?
Sumo is, and I have both of them in the program, but a sumo is a wider stance. So you're more like this. So you're more wide stance, feet turned out. So there is some abduction there. So I like them because it gets into some abduction strength, which we need. There's actually a study that showed pitchers typically had higher velocity pitchers had more abduction strength, because that's really what gets more momentum, gets you moving down the mound. But traditional deadlift, you're a little bit closer. I like to do the deadlifts more like Romanian deadlifts, because we do so much quad work, so much squatting work in the Olympic approach. Deadlifts can become squats very quickly. For example, trap bar deadlift is almost pretty much a quarter squat.
Yeah.
And we're already squatting our butts off with clean pulls, hang cleans. It's just quad. So we got to get into more posterior chain. So I like to do deadlifts more Romanian deadlift. And I'm going to call him out, but Mike Miner came in here with Chris Medlin, and I was training him, and I was teaching a deadlift from a more Romanian deadlift movement, was to keep the butt high and get into the posterior chain, and he did not like that. He got really mad at me, and I was like, he said, that's not a deadlift, and I'm like, well, it's a version of a deadlift. There's so many versions, right? There's RDLs, there's regular deadlifts, there's trap bar deadlifts, there's sumo deadlifts. There's tons of other ones. I forget all their crazy names. There's like tons of deadlifts. So at the end of the day, it's like, who cares what it's called? What's the purpose? And the purpose for me giving you a deadlift is posterior chain. Okay? Some coaches, the purpose for them giving you a trap bar deadlift is they just want to see lower body strength.
Yeah.
Well, that's not my purpose. I'm getting that in many other ways, right? So it really comes down to what is the purpose? Yeah. No sound. Well, everybody else seems to be hearing sound. Are they not hearing sound? That stinks. You have your phone. You can check to see if it hears sound. Would you use specific forms of the cleans to personalize to your weakness? Would you use specific forms of the cleans to personalize to your weakness? Yeah, I mean, sure, Ben. Ben, a variation of a clean is fine. Like below the knees, a high position, high thigh clean, mid thigh, low thigh. Blocking is no different. The problem is be careful with blocking. If you're pulling right from grabbing the bar and you're not loaded properly, it can mess with your technique. But that's YouTube. Can you go to Instagram? So I'm not worried about where you go with variations. All the variations are good. I wouldn't just stick to one. I think they all really serve a purpose. With C. Lonco, great info, keep it coming. Greatest real estate agent, greatest business agent, sports agent in America right there. Lonco. Okay, it's on. We're hearing it, guys. Thanks for checking. So it sounds like it was working. I'm sorry, maybe your sound wasn't on. How do you measure rotational strength? So we started doing it is we take the gym awares or the tendos, and you basically hold a bar and you just are turning as quick as you can, and it gives us watts. So we use like a power output because we're going to see how quickly you can do that, rate of force development, and we can get it in watts.
Harrison Lang asks, he's been more interested in kinesiology lately. Do you know any good books for beginners?
That's a good question. I think if you read any book on kinesiology as a beginner, it's probably going to be good. And you might not be there. It might be good to find a book, and I wouldn't say there is one specific book. I think you could probably pick Kinesiology for Dummies, and it'd take you to the right place. I think when you get a base understanding of anatomy, kinesiology can go into nutrition, it can go into research, like proper research. All is great, but because you need to get to a point where you just start reading the research. Mm-hmm. I'm getting my master's in kinesiology. I really enjoy my classes because some of my classes don't have a textbook, and they say they want us to learn out of studies, which is cool because you get more up-to-date information.
Yeah. The best thing that I've read, especially if you're an athlete, is Becoming a Supple Leopard by Dr. Kelly Starrett. That's a really good book.
But you're looking at someone's, and a lot of books are even that way, but with Dr. Kelly Starrett, he's a doctor of physical therapy. Mm-hmm. You're looking at his perspective of the body. He has a very unique perspective, and it's a very powerful perspective. It changed a lot of industries and changed us. We implemented it. But don't think that that's how everyone looks at it.
Yeah.
So you do also need to get other approaches like Active Life RX. You got to follow those guys. They have a completely different way of looking at it. And it's really, really powerful as well. So, but that's the thing. You can look through it in everyone else's eyes, but you can also get into the research and kind of read what's correlating and two, here's the thing, when you get into research, the introduction is them defining what they want to get out of the study or where they're looking to find out of the study. Then they start talking about other studies that have found similar things or what research is out there supporting what they're looking for and not supporting what they're looking for. So in the introductions, you get your kinesiology education. Yeah. And then you can link to the studies that are in there, and you read those introductions, and pretty soon you got a great degree in kinesiology.
Yeah.
What else?
The Baseball Man 99 has a couple questions on here. He said, do you recommend heavy RDLs, and how should the glove side be positioned during the pitching motion?
Yes, heavy RDLs, you got to work up to it. There's a posture thing you have to make sure is in check.
Yeah.
If you're rolling your back, you don't want to pull your back, guys. It's really, really a bad
It's not a good injury to have.
thing to do.
Yeah.
So you really, before you go heavy, you got to protect all that. So yeah, but definitely build up to heavy. What was the second question you mean?
What's a good positioning for the glove side in the pitching motion?
So with the glove side, you obviously, when you break your hands, you want to use it kind of as a guide because you're trying to stay closed. When you go into front foot strike, you're going to want to load the scap. The problem is you don't want to pull too much left to right. Studies show that low velocity pitchers typically have more left to right movement.
Because that causes a lot of rotation.
Yeah, and you don't want to be an early trunk rotator. You don't want to be tucking as you go into front foot strike. You want to allow the trunk to separate from the hip. And then it's just a turn down tuck as your trunk starts to move forward. So to me, it's a guide and then a stabilizer.
Yeah.
Guide, stabilizer. It's not a generator.
It's like a fulcrum that the body can like rotate around.
Perfect.
Once you
Yep.
like.
It's a fulcrum.
Yeah.
What point do you have enough strength and should focus mainly on other aspects like mobility? So don't think this is all like a linear progression, meaning like, ooh, I finished the strength road or the strength course. Now I can do the mobility course, because that's called, that's like phasing your training. And if you phase your training, you're atrophying one while you're hypertrophying the other, and it's just a scale. It's doing this. That's why if you think linear, then you think you got somewhere and then you've accomplished it and it stays with you. It's not true. There's scales, or I would say it's like a pyramid. You're trying to push everything to the top of the pyramid. So if you're working on strength, well, mobility, the kinetic chain, like all these other things could be atrophying. And then you go, oh crap, I got to get on my mobility. Then you drop your strength, you start working on mobility, and then you look back and now your strength is atrophied. Mm-hmm. So that's why we don't like a phasing approach. We typically do a comprehensive approach, and we're trying to push the scales up and up, like through into the top of the pyramid, mm-hmm. and then we're trying to hold it up there. And keep it there. But you have to hold it up. Like there's a constant effort to stay where you are. A constant effort to stay where you are.
Yeah.
It's thermodynamics. You know the laws of thermodynamics?
You're breaking me back to some.
All right. So the laws of
the
laws of thermodynamics says that there's a constant state of energy that it's like give and pull. You can't take energy out of the system. You can't put energy in. It's just like you move it over here, and then chaos goes over there. And so you're just constantly shifting around. But at any time you walk away, so if you organize all this energy to clump here, the moment you walk away, it's supposed to go back to chaos. Or it's called, I forgot the word, but it's supposed to basically go back to that constant form of energy, right? So the point is, like, in your entire life, you can clump things and put things and organize things, but when you walk away, it goes back to where it was. For example,
it's atrophying, yeah.
Yeah, you build a house, right? You build this beautiful house, you're like, oh, I did it. Well, in 1,000 years,
if you don't keep that
probably,
together, that's going to be a crappy house.
In 1,000 years, that house is probably dirt.
Yeah.
Or let's go even farther. 100,000 years, that house is dirt. The point is, everything we do and build and make it's going to go back to where it was before you organize it. So you got to understand that in your training.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm really strong. Like, I did it. I'm gonna be 60. I'm still gonna be this strong. Like, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like the higher up I've seen like guys get in their athletics. So like D1 college guys, your professional guys, they're taking so much time to take care of their bodies, to stay healthy, to stay strong, like just to stay at those levels, because it's such a higher demand. So it's a lot of work.
You got more your feet on the fire. Mike Lyman, he says, keeping your son's interest in college baseball with elbow pain, MR, can't see any problems. Mike, and Facebook, it goes to see more, and I can't see it. Zach says, during the pitching delivery, should the throwing arm elbow ever go above the shoulder while breaking? Zach, I'm sorry, man. The Facebook doesn't allow me to see more. You probably should go ask that question on Instagram or YouTube. We're on YouTube Live or Periscope. I got Periscope. What question you got?
Here's the one from a while back. Diego Gutierrez says, what do you recommend for arm conditioning?
So, conditioning the arm. What is the purpose of conditioning the arm? Is preparing it for repetition. So if you're just trying to get your arm ready to throw a lot of pitches at whatever speed it's at, then that just is volume training, meaning like you just start throwing, and you want to You know, the motor sleeve is a good way to monitor this so you don't go high risk where you throw too much. You overtrain and you hurt your arm. And basically the way their algorithm works is it's really stress management. So it's looking over time. So it's like, hey, in the past 2 weeks, how often did you throw and not throw? Okay, well, you threw every other day and you rested every other day, right? So you threw, you rest, you threw, you rest, you threw, you rest. Okay, well, how many did you throw each day? Well, it looks like you threw about 30 to 20 pitches every day. Well, that's a good even distribution of stress that your body can prepare for. Now, all of a sudden, you throw 80 pitches one day, and then you rest 4 days, and then you jump back. That's called trauma. You jumped out of that, basically that norm that you had put your body in. So if you want to get to say 120 pitches, you obviously don't want to jump to that. It's too much trauma on the body. You would want to go 30, rest, or if it's a 2-day rest, doesn't matter. 30, rest, then you go 40, rest, 50, rest, 60, rest. And eventually we're going to get to 100, 120. Yeah. But if we went 30 rest, 120, that's trauma, and then that soft tissue is going to be damaged. And if you don't give enough time to come back, whatever, there's a good chance injury occurred in that moment. Yeah. So if that's what you're talking about, conditioning. Now, if you're talking about velocity, that's a total different subject, and it's very different to how you would train for velocity.
Yeah.
You want to add anything or no?
If anything, I just would stress that you want to focus on creating a lot of stability around that shoulder. So you want to be like, a lot of people in baseball tend to not do overhead lifts, but I think that's one of the most important things that we should be doing as pitchers is overhead liftings, where we're forced to stabilize that scap and forced to make sure we're increasing the strength all around our shoulder. So that just gives us a healthier shoulder overall. But that also gets into a little bit more of velocity.
So some tips on developing a strong front leg, like avoiding collapsing. I get this question every single live stream, and I'll keep answering it, but this is popular. So better front leg. So when your front leg lands, studies show you about 250% of your body weight can hit front leg at a high velocity, and you have about 0.1, 0.2 seconds to release the pitch. So you have to be able to stop your momentum, because high velocity pitchers have less lead knee movement. They also land in more flexion and finish in more extension. But think about that, they do that in 0.1, 0.2 seconds. So they land, stop their momentum at 250% of their body weight, and in 0.1, 0.2 seconds, they extend to support velocity, which has a high correlation of velocity to pitch release. So that quickness of 0.1, 0.2 seconds to stop 250% of your body weight is a serious power number. You have to have a good high power to weight ratio. That's why I like to see good vertical jumps, good broad jumps, because it tells me you can do that. Also, too, if your hips haven't rotated, it's harder to stop your momentum. If your hips are rotating, just in rotating, it extends your front leg. So you need to be, your hips need to be rotating into front foot strike, not starting to rotate, already rotating into front foot strike. That'll support it as well. So you have to time your hip rotation well. You have to have good power to be able to stop all that force and extend into it that quickly. Those are the keys.
I've got Zach Morris says, how long should your stride be for a pitcher? Hearing different things, but I would believe comfort is the idea.
Well, it depends on how hard you want to throw. So if you want to, and this is also pertaining to a number that's getting more popular now, extension from rubber. So the average pitcher is around 5.5 feet to 6 feet from the rubber to pitch release. Mm-hmm. So if you can get a foot past that for every foot, that's 2 to 3 miles an hour in perceived velocity. So because what happens is the closer you get to the hitter, it starts cutting off reaction time. And that's why velocity is so powerful, because you're cutting off reaction time. Okay, so stride length obviously should be optimal, but if you start going too far, then you're not able to power your movement and use your kinetic chain well, and it's going to affect either stress on your arm or velocity at the end. So you might be striding far and then throwing slower, and then that's working against your perceived velocity. So there's a study that showed 87% or 85 to 90% was an ideal stride length, and that's of your height, and that's from the back foot. I don't think that's from the rubber. It's from the back foot. So your actual stride distance. Maybe it's from the rubber. Because if I'm 6 feet, no, it's in your body height. It should be in your body height. So go to work for 85 to 90% of your body height in your stride.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get more than that, that's awesome. As long as you're staying in that like strong, like powerful position. There's like high elite guys who can get over 100% of their stride length, but that's probably not what you want to shoot for initially.
Yeah. I love how I set the topics of these things, and nobody ever asked questions to my topics. Like, if it was on technology, I'm trying to throw it in there everywhere. So what technology helped you measure your stride length? It's not really measuring your stride length, but it's like the Diamond Kinetic pitch tracker gives you an extension measurement. I did a video on that just on my Instagram or all my social media if you want to check it out. What exercises can I do? I can't do power clean at the gym. What would be a better option to gain velocity? Find a place that'll let you do power cleans.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't find a bathroom. How other ways can I go to the bathroom? I can't find a bathroom. Go find a bathroom.
Nature.
So I'm just having fun with it. It's a fun. I get the question, but guys, we gotta make it happen.
Easy question here. Miguel Breza is asking, what is the Top Velocity email address? Not sure if I have the right one.
Brent, you can go to me. You can go to info or Brent at TopVelocity.net. How can you increase hip rotation speed? So if I have a cylinder here, right, and I have 2 sticks connected to the outside of the cylinder, and that's the only way I can spin that cylinder, right? Yeah, I can try to turn one cylinder stick the other way and turn it like this way, and I'll get some speed out of it. But the best way to do it would be to get it slightly rotated and then push this stick forward, right?
Yeah.
So here's the cylinder, sticks on both ends. I get it slightly rotated, and then I jam that stick really hard into it, when that thing spins, right?
Yep.
So that's where I have a whole series on this. Go to TopVelocity.net/lower half, all one word, how to use your lower half. That's why you want to sit, counter rotate, and then your front foot opens to trigger rotation and kind of gets that spin going. So your back stick, your back leg is now pushing at an angle, not straight to the hip. And then you drive, and boom, that spins and accelerates your hips at a top speed. Yeah. So you have to use your legs. That's really the key.
Yeah. Baseball Man 99, he says, should your hips move forward and down at the same rate as you drive, or do the hips move up as you drive?
No, everything should keep going down into your front foot ideally. So you want to fall forward and down at the same rate, and just before you land, you open your front foot, and then you peak your drive to accelerate all that hip speed and convert all that energy up your chain.
Yeah.
Interesting. Would you suggest engaging forearms by slightly pulling the bar before you finish your power clean setup? I find it makes my pulls better as I get higher in weight. Is this correct? Would you suggest engaging forearms by slightly pulling the bar? Well, here's the thing. You're not supposed to be pulling at all on your lifts, your cleans. I do like some strong cables. Like, they should be used as cables. Like, so if I'm hanging and I'm fully extended, there's not a lot of stability in my pulls. So a slight little bend gives me stability. It creates stability in the pull, and then it projects up better. But there should never be any pulling past that. Yeah. Because that's that old saying, when your elbows bend, your power ends. When I start doing this, my legs don't want to work anymore because I'm putting all my effort here. My impulses are going to only go one place. It's hard to fire everything at the same time, right? Yeah. So when you start firing your arms, your legs are just going to shut off. That's why you can't over pull in your cleans. It'll kill the movement.
Yeah, your primary movers got to be your hips, and you're wanting that power to come from your legs. And when you start rowing, that's you're losing your legs. So he's saying you can have that slight bend just to get up to that hip crease, but that your hips are powering that bar up, and you're not rowing the bar.
And
up.
It's more. I mean, it's coming through the hips, but it's also lower leg. It's knee extension. It's called triple extension. It's the whole lower leg powering through the floor to drive your thighs under the bar. What do you think triple extension can lead to? Do you think triple extension can lead to hip issues? Lincecum has an injury, and Trevor Bauer switches delivery due to his hip. So anything can lead to injury, but if the lower half, which is typically the bigger, stronger body, is my alternative to using the upper half, which is a smaller amount of muscles, I'm going to want to put more efforts here. Now, I've had that debate before, and more than likely why I got into a lawsuit with Trevor Bauer, because he doesn't like me talking about him. But the challenge with someone like Trevor Bauer, I broke this on a video, but out of good faith, I removed it from the internet because he didn't want it on there. But what I showed was there were changes in how early he drove, but he still drives and extends through his back leg. I wouldn't say because it's a little bit later extension, it's not as dynamic as it used to be, because I think that, and ultimately I think that's what he did to, what he did to get his arm his arm path different, and which I believe helped his off-speed stuff, and it was a plus for his off-speed stuff. I don't think it was, I would say it didn't look as beneficial for his health over time, but we'll see. Now, Tim Lincecum, to me, so what I'm saying is Trevor Bauer was, sequencing and could have, there's another thing too, like Trevor Bauer really wasn't lifting as he is now. It seems like he's lifting more. Now, I don't exactly know what he's doing, but it seems like it looks bigger to me.
Stronger,
it seems like he's been lifting more. So to me, it could have been more. He needed to be lifting back then if he was having back problems from it. Mm-hmm. Because, like I said, I still see a similar lower half, not the same. I see a similar lower half that still is implementing close to full extension of the back leg. And Tim Lincecum, it was kind of the same thing because they mimicked each other. Remember, Trevor Bauer said there was a website he watched Tim Lincecum on. I'm glad he didn't sue that guy, right?
Yeah.
He never would have learned how Tim Lincecum threw. But there was a Tim Lincecum, he watched a video of Tim Lincecum, so he mimicked his delivery, and they were very similar. Well, Tim Lincecum also didn't train. So if I have this hip musculature and I'm putting all my torques through here as opposed to trying to put them all through here by overcompensating, I do need to do some conditioning here to keep it strong as I age and I start to hypertrophy so I don't tear the joint up. So I always tell guys that, look, yeah, we're putting stress on our bodies, but where do you want to put it? Do you want to put it here, or do you want to put it here and down here? Now, obviously, I'd like to distribute as best I can, but still, this joint right here is going to take a lot more abuse than this joint and this joint,
Yep.
and that's ultimately what we do.
Yep. What's a good power clean to weight ratio? Ben Goodrick.
So power clean to weight ratio. So we talked about power to weight ratio. If you're over 6 feet, I say something around 130% of your body weight. Specifically, even the heavier you are would be beneficial, would be elite for pitching. If anything under 6 feet, I would push you to 150% or maybe even more, depending on how small you are. So that's where we typically balance it out. Dom Dabrowski, can you check out my sled drills? Yeah, Dom, I'll try to get to him. Sorry, I've been behind.
Enik Sturgeon, just
You've been hitting them
butchered
all?
that name. Not all of them.
Okay.
What do you think about weightlifting shoes?
Yeah, I love Olympic lifting shoes. I like the hard soles. Hard soles give you more stability. You don't have a lot of movement like you do in soft soles. I like it when it's loud. It's fun to have and kind of get a sense of how your feet are working. It's kind of like the king of the hill. You hear the pops, the slaps, right? There's a little lift in them, so it can help you with you have dorsiflexion issues. I love them. What, do you like them?
Weightlifting shoes are great if you have those dorsiflexion issues, or if you can't do a full squat without doing it's called a butt wink. If you're going down and you're causing like your lower half to like essentially drop, and it's causing like a
Or
bend
tuck
in that
under.
lower
So the
lower
pelvis
spine.
starts to tuck under,
That's what
and then it starts to roll your spine.
Yeah, that's what a butt wink is. So if you do that when you get into a deep squat, then lifting shoes would probably be really good for you. You can test it out by basically just getting a plate and putting your heels on it, and that's essentially what a lifting shoe does for you. Is it gives you that improved like dorsiflexion. I don't personally use them. I like to use they're called Merrill Vapors. Essentially, like it's a Vibram. It's like barefoot lifting, but a lot of people find a lot of benefit for lifting shoes.
So what do you think is the most important hitting component biomechanically, and how do you improve it? So I'm pretty excited to get a hitting question. So I have the Ground Force Torque Hitting Program, TopVelocity.net/GFT. What is Ground Force Torque? And it will probably go into a good hitting component. Ground force you push into the ground. Torque is the other way we create force through the body, which is stabilizing joints to build rotational angular velocity off of. So when we shift our weight into front foot, That's an opportunity to create ground force. We're going to shift weight in the front foot. That's going to push force in the ground, and then that ultimately you can push force back up. And the torque is the rotational component into that. So holding torsion in the back leg, and as you transfer, unloading torsion with that ground force, and it just accelerates rotational energy up their body. Same thing. The arms, the shoulders separate, they unload, and it creates all that kinetic energy coming up. So the most important components, I would say, are those two together: ground force and torque, right? So you got to learn to sit into your hip, feel torsion, or you're resisting into rotation in your femur as you sit. As a hitter, you sit and you shift all your weight in the front foot as you unload torsion, boom, and you feel all that energy power through your hip. And then all you have to do at that point is your upper body, your elbows got to come down, connect to that hip, and ride all that linear energy through the zone, all that energy created from the ground. So really learning, same thing. It's like learning the ground force and the torsion movements in the lower half is really your bread and butter for hitting. That's where your power is. If you want to be a power hitter, that's where it is.
Yeah.
How can you increase hip rotation speed? So we talked about that earlier in just the mechanical components of it. And then once you get the mechanical components, it's ground force, then you want to get more force in the ground. You need more triple extension power. You need more, just more explosive power, higher power to weight ratio. TopVelocity.net/lower half. Got a course on all this if you really want to get into the details.
Chandler Kazil says, can you give some tips to keep drive leg from collapsing when moving down the mound?
Drive leg from collapsing. So if you as you're going down the mound, if you let your hips, if you let rotation go early. So if I'm lifting and I'm going down the mound and I open, rotation goes early, look where this back leg goes. It collapses. Okay? So what we're trying to do is delay rotation, delay, and rotate at the end of the stride, and that prevents it from collapsing. So collapsing, and there's one other way. So collapsing is going to be rotating too early, and it's going to be internally rotating. I mean, it still links to rotation. Maybe you're staying closed, but you're letting your knee go internal, and it's basically you're not allowing it to load into abduction. It's more adducting early, and it's still almost the same thing as rotating early, but it's like you're staying hips closed, but you're letting the femur into and rotate, and it's collapsing that way. So we call it holding torsion, delaying rotation. All those things prevent the collapse.
Yeah.
You want to add? That was cool.
That was good.
Most of your programs seem to be focused for older athletes. What do you recommend for a 13-year-old? Build leg power and med ball throws. I recommend the program. There's a beginner guide that is for 15U. I say he starts with the beginner guide, TopVelocity.net, and then he works up to the extreme in the next year or two. I mean, if you're 13 years old, wouldn't you love this?
I wish I would have found this stuff when I was younger. Like I found this when I was 27 years old. Like if I could have had this when I was 18, when I was 16, when I was 13, man.
Would you have waited? Would you be like, I'm too young?
No.
I know. Everyone you talk to, they're like, oh, please, could I have learned this younger?
Yeah, like it doesn't matter the age you are. Like you can get stronger, you can get better, you can start to develop the right kinetic chain, like the right sequencing.
Tons of things, because there's so much you have to learn.
Yeah.
So starting younger, it just means more time. So I remember Matt Bruce is an Olympic lifter. He's retired, and I learned a lot from Matt. And he trained for 17 years. He was world team. He was all world. I forgot how many times. 10 times. I don't know. A lot. He was like a Olympic alternate, and Kendrick Ferris was the only guy who could beat him. And I said, well, even though when you even look at him in the world stage, America hasn't won a gold medal since the 1960s. And I remember one time asking Matt, I was like, what really held you back in your career? And he's like, I started too late. I think he started at 13 or 14.
Gosh.
But Europe's starting at like 6, 7,
yeah.
Asia even younger. So I'm telling you, time in the sport is really powerful, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything over there you got?
Let's see. Jesus DeCamp says, what's the difference between 3X drive and 2X drive?
Okay, so the 3X is in the pitching program, and that's triple extension. So that's getting, loaded in torsion, getting a linear force vector, and opening and triggering ankle, knee, and hip flexor extension. Boom, right? 2X, position players, they don't really have to go through these long, full explosive strides. They can use their momentum to really build a lot of their energy, but they still want to get the hip rotation. So 2X is really ankle and hip. So it's, you got your energy going, you planted your back foot, you open front foot, you kicked your hip through, separated, and through across the diamond or whatever. So you're really extending ankle hip as opposed to on the mound where you want to try to extend it all because you're starting in a static position and you're trying to maximize leg power. So you might as well go through every joint you have to get that power. See, how would you train for velocity when you said velocity is totally different thing? I just jumped in late as you were explaining how to not get injured. Velocity is a totally different thing. Oh, you're talking about the conditioning your arm to velocity. So conditioning your arm is just preparing your arm for the reps at whatever intensity you're at. So, if you're throwing 70% and 70% of you is 80 and you want to throw 100 pitches at 80, well, you got to go, like I talked about, and go through that slow curve of building up to that without causing trauma. But if you want 60% to be 90 and not 80, it doesn't matter how many times you throw 80. So if I'm 60%, I'm at 80, there's nothing that really says if I just throw 120 times or 1,200 times that this 60% is going to be 90 now. There is a velocity improvement from reps, but it's limited. And rarely for guys who throw 80, is it going to be a 90 mile an hour or 10 mile an hour jump. So where do we have to go from there? What is velocity? Velocity is a product of energy moving through the body into the ball. So it's 60%. Whatever 60% of energy moving through your body to the ball is not equaling 90, it's equaling 80. So we need to ramp that up to get to 80. It's that simple, right? So how do we ramp that up? That's more force in the ground. How do we get more force in the ground? We get more muscle activity or more power to extend and fire our muscles. We get also better at sequencing the body to multiply forces up the chain to get into the ball. So therefore in velocity training, you're working on mobility, sequencing, power production, strength, and then the mechanics to put it all together. That's what the time you're spending in drills, lifts, exercises. It's not about reps, just reps on just throwing every day at that point.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Zach Morris says, for the med ball throws, do you have a specific drill you like better for using the kinetic chain? You were actually talking to me a little bit about this, where you were saying you can't really cherry pick the specific drills. It's really just the whole program that you want to incorporate. Every drill uses the full kinetic chain.
You're exactly right. We got a minute and 30 seconds for Instagram, so jump over to YouTube if you want to see the rest. Did Bauer have hip surgery at one point? I'm not sure. How can you get more counter rotation? You just want to stabilize your hips and start closing your shoulders. How can you get better with control? Is it a lot or a mental issue? Yeah, that's going to be being consistent with your delivery and basically being focused on your movement. So if you can get your delivery consistent and focused on where you want to go, you should be fine. How long does it take? That's too long. Is there a difference between 95 from 20 yards versus 10 yards? To who? I don't know to who. How can you increase hip rotation speeds? Does leg lift, drive affect this? Yes, drive, timing. We talk about this in the course, TopVelocity.net/lower half. Is it possible to keep the front leg completely stiff? Yes, but the purpose is going to be to keep your hips closed, and it's going to be hard to power like that. Thoughts on Texas Base Ranch? I haven't spent any time there, so I wouldn't know. Please describe the role of hips for the front foot strike. Drive forward and down the whole time, or forward and down till the hip pops forward. Forward and down until your your front foot opens and your back leg drives rotation. Thoughts on, I just did that. I told Steve this is their coach who thinks landmine press is better than the snatch or clean. Yeah, I don't see how that would be an alternative. Exercises for velo while not gaining weight. Stronger, powerful, sequencing the kinetic chain. Earlier you get into TopV system, the better it is because that gives you time to master velocity and get more accurate. Oh, another one, he asked it, but it's just about to die. All right, guys, see y'all on Instagram. We'll finish up here on YouTube. It stinks. Instagram gives you that short time. Huh?
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. During the arm path, are you throwing arm during the arm path, your throwing arm should not go above your shoulder before front foot strike. Yeah, it should. So healthier arm slots are typically somewhere around 95 to 100. Okay, I think higher velocities are 90, but the healthier slots are here. It's probably because your arm lays back more there. So you actually are slightly above your shoulder. You do have to be careful. If you don't have good upper body strength and your scaps don't upwardly rotate, you can get into impingements and you can hurt your arm up here. But you typically have more mobility up here with the arm, as long as your scaps can stabilize up there. And overhead work is right. Tell them how important overhead work is for stabilizing over your head.
Overhead work, I mean, it's huge. Like, if you can't stabilize a heavier weight over your head, then like moving like your arm rapidly through like an overhead pitch and then decelerating that, like,
impossible.
Ridiculous.
And can you believe that the one thing coaches tell you not to do is probably the most important thing you have to do? It's crazy.
Yeah.
If I become a 3X certified teacher, can I come to a camp just to observe? Well, to become a 3X certified coach, I require you, this is what actually Thomas is going through, I require you to come to a camp and learn from me, and I want to help you implement it where you are. I'll even help you market it where you are as well.
And learn by doing. Like, if you're able to do it, then you're able to teach it.
Do you think it's beneficial to kids from a slide step to avoid a slow leg lift and opening? Of teach kids from a slide step. Yeah, I do like that. I actually like teaching them from the stretch from a slide step, because the lifts just put more momentum, more force or forces through the movement, which can be hard to control. So start them in a slide step. They can focus on starting at a slower speed, organizing the body, and then trying to get what energy they can up through it is a better approach until they become stronger and more efficient with their kinetic chain. Better pitching mechanics in 70s, 80s, or today's pitchers? That's a good question, 70s and 80s. I don't know. I just haven't gone back and looked at a lot of 70s and 80s. I'd say today, definitely today. From what I remember with like Eckersley, Guskasic, Ryan, Seaver, who even goes back there? I don't know. Who were you remember any pitchers from back then? I mean, those guys were all really good, but I see a lot of talent today. So I would say today wins.
Yeah. That's funny. Timmy Lincecum. How can I come train with you guys? I used to play in the show.
Yeah, no. I wish Tim Lincecum could come train with us, because we actually talked to his agent like 3 times. We sent him videos on how his delivery broke down, how his stride length got shorter, how his trunk stopped moving, didn't move as far forward. Yeah. Because Tim's biggest problem was, in my boat, my opinion, don't sue me, Tim, it's my opinion, I'm just kidding, is he lost some of his athleticism. I always heard he could do a backflip when he was coming up. It'd be interesting to see if he can still do a backflip. Like, I want to see, are those athletic measurements the things that he could do when he was at his prime? Can he still do that today? Something I did with Barry Zito. I really showed Barry Zito. I was like, Barry, look at all the things athletically that, these elite guys do. And he would always go, Brent, I'm not that athletic. And I said, okay, you're probably right. You throw 84. That's what I was working with. I was like, but when you won the Cy Young and you were throwing low 90s, were you a better athlete then? And he would say, by far. Yeah. He had a thicker neck. He was jacked back then. And then so the point is, like, I think that was the big thing with Tim Lincecum. I don't think he kept a good strength approach. He let his body, he let his athleticism break down through the wear and tear of the years due to his age at the time. And he needs to build himself back up. He needs to rebuild. You look at guys like Lester and Lackey and Peavy, and they kept their size, they kept their strength, they kept those intensities. And I think that's what allowed them to endure this game longer. David Ardsman, we really had a lot of success taking David Ardsman at 35 years old, or 33 years old, and literally crushing him in the weight room and rebuilding his kinetic chain and getting him to put it into his movements. And almost a 10 miles an hour increase. And then we did that with, Chris Medlin. We did that with Cody Hall. We did that with, Marksberry's coming back. Unbelievable. Guy said he had 80 and 98 the other day. We did that with who else? Who other big layer? We're lucky to have been working with with Trevor Rosenthal. We're excited with him. But this guy's, he already gets it. This guy's just a weight room freak.
Yeah.
And you'll never see him lose. So that's really what Tim needs. If he still wants to do it or needed, you know?
Yeah.
Anything else?
In the 3X Extreme Pitching Program, is overhead farmer's walk in level 3?
No, we don't do the. So if you want to do it, you know, look, Active Life can give you better instruction on this. But if you want to do it, I'd say on your squat days, you can do your overhead farmer carry, start life and build up. It's a good alternating. Do it carries, alternating one arm carries. It really gets a lot of oblique work. And then overheads, good overhead stability work. I do recommend putting those in on, say, squat days.
Yeah. What do you think of the closed stance? What you want to answer?
Closed stance?
Yeah, I don't know what he means.
So Periscope, here it's finally got questions on Periscope. Let's see. Me and my buddy go to the Ivy Tech, and we work on Top Velocity every day. Love this stuff. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. It's Periscope. Man, it's just so hard to read questions on Periscope. Now I probably just lost them because I was sliding down and it kicked it off. Come on. Where are my questions? All right. Was there another one? We're getting close to the end, guys, here.
Dan Dombrowski says, how long does it take to get to a 285, 290 power clean starting at 170? What have you seen? How long?
Answer it.
How long does it take to get to 280? So there's not really a specific set time. As long as you are doing the movement properly, and as long as you're training hard, and like, how are you programming your training? How are you working to increase that like maximal effort? How often are you actually doing maximal effort? If you're at 170 right now, it would probably take a good amount of like hard training and like not in-season training, but like off-season training to get up to like 280, 290. Like that's a significant jump.
Well, he needs to hear from me because I've been telling him that for a while. That Dan.
That like 280, 290 power clean is you're moving weight. So you got to make sure you're not just getting your power cleans heavy. You're also getting your front squats heavy. You're getting your deadlifts heavy. Like you're a freaking athlete if you're doing a 290 power clean. So you really need to make sure you're moving properly through the kinetic chain and moving properly through that triple extension before you can do 280, 290 in a power clean.
All right, cool. Well, we're just going to end it there. One more popped up as we were talking. Oh, that's AP. Any thoughts on Sunny Gray windup versus traditional windup? Do you see any pros or cons in either way? You know, I was always been a big fan. I haven't been really watching him much lately. I know that he's aging. I'm sure he's having issues with keeping his dynamics, keeping his back leg, driving and moving him down the mound. But I've always been a big fan. I think, you know, crazy mobility, insane hip to shoulder separation. But if he doesn't keep his legs under him, like every pitcher out there, it just deteriorates and starts to destroy the kinetic chain. So I hope he can keep that up. It's not easy though, and it's eventually going to go away. Cool. So I think that's it. Any last words you want to say? Remember, check out Unearthed Academy. Is that what you call it?
Unearthed? No, yeah, just Unearthed Sports Complex. Our Instagram's at Unearthed Sports, and our webpage TampaUnderground.com/unearthed.
Cool. We'll see you guys.